Okay, thanks for jumping on. Today, I'm going to have you talk about your paternal grandparents, Leandrew Brown and Maybelle Pressnell, and their children, and potentially their children, who would be your first cousins. So, yeah, go ahead and talk to us about those people.
Okay. Andrew Brown was about 10 years old whenever his father, John Milton Brown, built this house here on Holt Road in Limestone County, Alabama. And he basically grew up there. But his father died when he was fairly young, and he continued to live here with his mother. My grandmother, Maybelle Pressnell, lived on the next farm just to the south of the home place. And so they grew up knowing each other as neighbors. And so eventually they got married and started having a family. Now, at the time that they got married, Grandpa Brown's mother was still alive, and he was living in the house with her.
Grandpa Brown's mother was Sarah Tabitha Holland.
Sarah Tabitha Holland.
Okay.
She was still living. And so he he was living in the house with her. When she died,
1927.
1927, Leandrew's siblings demanded that the house and farm be sold and that the inheritance be divided up among them. So that was done. They actually held an auction on the courthouse steps in Athens. And at the auction, my grandfather, Leandrew Brown, bought the farm back. He had borrowed the money from a doctor in Elkmont. And so all his siblings were paid off. And then he continued to live here in the house and to raise his family here. When my father, James Milton Brown, who was the oldest, when he was about 10 years old, Leandrew Brown had a hunting accident. And he was out with some relatives, and they were hunting rabbits and squirrels, and he had a shotgun. And he climbed across a fence to get onto the other side. And as he was climbing across that fence, the shotgun went off and shot him in the heel of his foot. And so he was injured pretty bad, and he was laid up for a while. He couldn't work. And so it was left up to my dad, James Milton Brown, to work the farm and support the family as a 10-year-old.
Wow.
And so he began to do that. He had already been working with his dad, and he was quite comfortable, working with teams of mules and all the farm equipment that you needed to do that. And this was basically a cotton farm. And so my father began to work the crop while his dad was laid up in the bed with an injured ankle, injured heel. My dad, James Milton Brown, loved to ride the horses and mules that they had. And so about this time, my grandfather had bought a mule that was broke to work, pull a plow and a wagon, but it was not broke to ride. So whenever my dad would try to ride him, he would buck him off. He didn't like people trying to ride him. So one day my dad decided to lock him up in a stall in the barn. And right above that stall was a door, like a 3x3 door in the loft of the barn, where you could drop hay down through. And my dad got up there in the loft, and he waited for that mule to get right directly below him. When that happened, he jumped down on the mule's back while it was locked up in the stall. And the mule began to buck and jump around, and he bucked him off. And after he bucked my dad off, he kicked him in the forehead. And for the rest of his life, my dad had a scar on his forehead that was kind of in the shape of a horseshoe. And so my grandmother told me one time that before that happened, my dad was one of the sweetest people that you would ever meet. He was just a sweet, kind young boy. But after that happened, he got mean and his whole personality changed. And so that was not good for the rest of the family because he was the oldest and he was mean to everyone. My dad was born in 1920. So when he had to take over the farm and start supporting the family, it was during the Depression. And the cotton had dropped from 50 cents a pound to 5 cents a pound. So my grandfather was worried that they were going to lose the farm, and he didn't like the idea that he couldn't make the payments and keep up with his debt. So he went to the doctor that he had borrowed the money from, and he told him that he was going to give up the farm. The doctor tried to talk him out of it, but Grandpa wouldn't listen to him. So he gave the farm up, and the Pressnells, some of the Pressnells had moved from Alabama to Arkansas. And so Grandpa Brown decided that they would move to Arkansas and he would rent a farm there and they would work it and make a living that way. So they loaded up all their furniture and they moved to Arkansas. And I don't remember exactly what area of Arkansas they were at, but he found a man that would rent him some farmland. And so he did that. After they got there, this was in early spring. My dad got a mule and a plow, and he started plowing the ground, getting it ready for the crop. And my Uncle Sam said that he had plowed 50 acres. And then the landowner came to him and he told him, he said, "Mr. Brown, let me tell you how it's going to be here." He said, "On the weekends, I'm going to come here and I'm going to stay with your wife. And my sons are going to be here and they're going to sleep with your daughters. So that's how it's going to be if you farm my land." And Grandpa said, "That's not going to happen." So then the man said, "Well, if that's not going to happen, you need to find another place to live." So my dad was out on the farm right then plowing, and Grandpa Brown sent my dad's younger brother, Joe, who was 5 years younger than my dad, sent Joe to the field to tell my dad to bring the mule and the plow to the house, that he didn't need to plow here anymore. So my dad did that. And when he got there, my grandfather told my dad, "Hey, you and I need to go look for another farm to rent." And so they left home and went and was looking for another farm to rent. As they were going about, they came to a place. They were walking down a railroad track and they came to a river. And there was a railroad bridge over the river. So they were walking across the bridge. And while they were walking across it, a train started coming their way. And so, because my grandfather was kind of crippled, he couldn't walk very fast. So my dad would run ahead and then he would come back and he would get Grandpa and he would tell him, "Hey, we got to go. We got to hurry up. We're going to get run over by this train." So they finally made it to the end of the bridge and they jumped off onto the riverbank and saved themselves from being run over by the train. After that, they finally found another farm that they could rent. And so the man who owned that farm had a big truck and he got his truck and they got in there with him and he drove back to the place where they were living to move their furniture to his farm. After Grandpa Brown and my dad left, the man who owned the farm where they were living to start with, he and his boys would ride their horses up and they would ride around and around the house shooting their pistols up in the air to try to scare my grandma into complying with his wishes. But she kept the door shut and kept it locked, so they weren't able to get in. But she started talking to the children, and she told them, she said, if Leandrew and Milton are not back by this Sunday, we're going to leave here and we're going to walk back to Alabama. But that evening, before they were to do that, they showed up with the new landowner and the truck. They loaded all their stuff on the truck and he took them to the new farm where they were to farm. And they stayed there for a few years, but then it didn't work out too well. So they came back to Alabama. Now, when they came back to Alabama, they rented a farm right across the road from where the Pressnells lived. And my daddy and Grandpa Brown built a 2-room house on that farm. And they lived in a 2-room house. My daddy's younger sister, just younger than him, was named Ruby. And Ruby was 2 or 3 years younger than my dad. And she later, when she was grown, she married Tom Harris. And Aunt Ruby and Tom had 5 children. They had Charles, Ann, James, Jerry, and Linda. And they always lived close here in Limestone County. So we spent a lot of time with them as we were all growing up together. My Uncle Joe was the next oldest, and he was 5 years younger than my dad. And he was a truck driver. And he lived here in this area until he was 33 years old. And when he was 33, he got married and moved to Brunswick, Georgia. And he married a woman by the name of Betty Boone. And when Uncle Joe moved to Brunswick, Georgia, that's where Betty was from, his father-in-law helped him to buy a small convenience store in the town of Brunswick, Georgia. And so he ran that store for a while. Then after that, later on, he bought 2 gas stations, managed those, and that's what he did for many years. He and Betty never had any children of their own, so eventually they adopted a young girl and named her Stephanie. They adopted a baby and named her Stephanie. And they raised her until she was grown and she got married. After that, the next sibling of my daddy was Lucille. And Lucille was 2 or 3 years younger than Joe. And so Lucille, when she was grown, she decided to go on a mission. So she was the first person in our family to go on a mission. And she did that. And then after her mission, she came back home and she lived here for a while. And she got a job working at a store in Decatur, a clothing store. And so she did that for a few years. And then she met a man by the name of Paul Helms. They got married. And they lived here for a little while, but eventually moved to Gadsden. But Paul and Lucille had several children. Let's see if I can remember all of their children. We didn't see them very much. I believe his son, let's see, he had a son named Paul. I believe he was the oldest, then a daughter, Sharon, then a son, Stephen, then 2 girls, Katie and Marie, then a boy named Joel, and a girl named Belva. And so they lived in Gadsden, and we would see them occasionally, but not that often. Then after Aunt Lucille, there was Uncle Sam. And Uncle Sam lived here in Limestone County most of his life. He married Laureen, which is my mother. Estelle is my mother. Laureen is Estelle's sister. So Uncle Sam married Laureen. They had 3 children, Sue, Diane, and Roger. And they lived here in this area all of their life. Then there was Lyman. Lyman was the next oldest. And Lyman had a girlfriend here by the name of Elizabeth, and he was really crazy about Elizabeth. But then Elizabeth's dad decided to move them to Arkansas. And so Elizabeth and her family moved to Arkansas, and that made Lyman pretty sad. So after a while here, my Grandpa Brown died. And after Grandpa Brown died, Lyman decided to go to Arkansas to be with Elizabeth. So he moved to Arkansas, and he and Elizabeth got married, and they had a family out there, which we didn't see very often. But their children were Donna, Donald Ray,
Shows Donna Faye, Ronnie Lee Brown.
Ronnie, Chris, and Angie. And so they grew up in Arkansas. We didn't see them that often. Then after that, my dad's younger sister was Eavy Mae. And Eavy Mae married a man in the neighborhood close to where they lived by the name of Robert Green. And after they got married, Robert went into the Army, and he went to Korea during the Korean War. Then after he got released from Korea, he was sent to Germany. And when he was in Germany, Eavy Mae went there and joined him and lived with him in Germany. And they had a baby by the name of Debbie, little girl. Then after he was released from the Army, he moved back here. And they had a son by the name of Robert Jr. that they called Butch. And so after Butch was born, then they had another son by the name of Rick. And then after Rick, Pam. And Pam is married to James Brannon, who is my wife's brother. The youngest of the Brown children was my Uncle Bill. And my Uncle Bill is only 10 years older than me. And so Uncle Bill lived here in Limestone County, graduated from Tanner High School, got a job with an aerospace company in Huntsville, went to work for McDonnell Douglas, I believe. And then after working for them for a couple of years, he went on a mission. And his mission was in Texas. And then after he got back from his mission, he continued to work for McDonnell Douglas in Huntsville. And he married Virginia Adair, who was from Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. And they had a number of children. See if I can remember their names. You got it there?
Like Greg and Grant, or
Yeah, all of well, there's 8
more?
children.
Okay. Let me see if I can.
Rhonda was the oldest.
Oh, okay.
You see her?
So if they're living, Family Search doesn't show them yet.
There was Rhonda and Sheila and Grant. Sheila and Grant. Beverly, Greg. I can't remember the rest. But anyway, they had 8 children altogether.
Okay.
And Uncle Bill, when he was here, he became the bishop of our ward. Later on, he became the stake president of the Huntsville, Alabama stake. My Uncle Joe was our branch president when he lived here. When he moved to Georgia, he became a bishop, a stake president, and then a patriarch. And my Uncle Sam was a counselor in the branch presidency with Uncle Joe. Later, he became a counselor in the district presidency when we were in the North Alabama district. After Huntsville became a stake, my Uncle Sam was called to be the patriarch of the Huntsville, Alabama stake, and he held that position until he died.
Nice.
My Uncle Lyman was a branch president in Arkansas when he was living there. So all of the members of the family were active in the church, held leadership positions, and were good, upstanding people.